Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, last couple of videos I talked about this idea that I'm not super happy with my job and I need to change, but I also mentioned in the first video that I'm not making enough money. So how much money is enough, Ivan? How much more money do I need to make in order to feel like I would be secure or it would be, good for my well-being in general, all that kind of stuff. How much money do you need to make? Do you need to make more money? So I decided to take a look at this and get down to brass tacks and not, speak in riddles like one of those talking heads and actually talk about real world numbers. And they always say, well, don't divulge how much you make, but they are usually the people that are paying you and they don't want you to know because either they don't want other people to know how little they're paying their employees or they don't want the guy next to you to realize that you're paying, they're paying you a lot more. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I make, what I need to make, and what I used to make, because the interesting thing is inflation. And I'm used to talking about inflation and thinking about inflation in terms of things like looking at 1970 when I was 2 years old and how much things cost then and how much things cost now, what incomes have gone on. But I need to talk about actual real life examples that I lived through so I know what it felt like to make that much money. So right now at my job, $45,250. That apparently is my base salary. I think I made 46 last year. I thought it was 43, but some sort of was non-taxable. I don't know why. I don't care. That's essentially the base salary that I make in 40 hours a week. I make almost no overtime. It was pretty minimal at that point. Now, a very good friend of mine assures me that the car bonus that I have, where I pretty much pay $100 a month for a car, so I get to use a company car, is worth $20,000 a year. I would have thought it would have been 10 or 15, but he knows a lot more about finance and money than I do, and business than I do. So I'm going to go with his answer. So we're going to say my job is worth $65,250 a year in terms of a salary. Well, that's sounding pretty good, right? Now, I also played music last year, and I think before expenses, it was about $13,500, a little less than that, but right there. Now we're talking about, well, what is Ivan actually making? What is he grossing? $78,750. That sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? And where the heck is it? So let's go look at my net, though. And I think, I'm not being taxed at a very high rate, but my net without a car, $53,500. That's what I'm actually bringing home to pay bills with. All right. I know my expenses were at least $52,250 before stuff. I mean, I think they were actually more than that. They might have actually exceeded my income by a little bit. I'm not 100% sure. But, if I look at all my monthly expenses, all the things I have to pay for, and I'm including things like food and all that kind of junk, it's about that much. Now, so I need to make more. I'm not quite making enough because I'm at this point where I'm in debt. I can't get rid of this debt. And I don't have a cushion of any kind. And I'm at the point where I'm totally living paycheck to paycheck. But let's take a jump back to the past when things were going a little bit better for me. In fact, we're going to look at my best year ever financially. And that was in 2002. I was working for the state of Connecticut. And by the way, I do live in the state of Connecticut in the United States of America, so things are expensive here. But in 2002, as a state employee, I made $90,000 that year. And this was done by working 65 hours a week because there was a lot of overtime available. As a state employee, we're 35-hour employees, so that meant I had to hustle every single week and get another 30 hours. And I managed to do it that year. And I had a couple of years around it, but I had other things happening where I broke my leg at one point, so I couldn't make, all that kind of stuff, make that much money. So there's definitely that, was happening. So it was a lot of money, right? However, I was paying a lot in child support and alimony, which I do not begrudge. But our kids went to a private school, so that cost me. I was actually paying $500 a week in 2002. So it's $37,000 in child support and alimony, and that was net actually. But we'll just pretend it was gross. Let's go with $53,000 gross at that point. However, here's where things get really wonky. I was shocked to find out that if you had a dollar in 2002, in order to have the same amount of purchasing power now at the beginning of 2025, you would need $1.75. That meant my $90,000 salary today would be $157,000 and $500. $157,500. Even if I looked at, okay, well, take away the child support. Let's say where you can't live on that. $92,000, $750 in today's dollars. That's what I would be making on that salary back then. And I look at the other expenses I have, because I was buying stupid things like cigarettes and alcohol, which I no longer do. And so my lifestyle is much, much better now. And even then, I was living more extravagantly then. So I was doing okay. Wasn't fantastic, but it was okay. But now, let's take a look at today's salary in 2002. We looked at how much money I make. And we looked at how much money I make from the car, from my base salary, and from music, which music is about 10 hours a week, more or less. I make about $25 an hour playing music, with the gigs, including like travel time and maybe if I need to practice for something like that. Okay, what would the equivalent purchasing power been or salary have been in 2002 at 50 hours? $45,000. Not the 78,750, but I'm making $45,000 at that point. That's the equivalent purchasing power back then. That's what I had to make back then. Interestingly enough, my base salary as a state employee in 2002 was $45,500 and 35 hours a week, making $25 an hour back then. That was a salary that I could not live on back then. It was not enough money for me to make ends meet. And admittedly, to live the lifestyle I was living. But pretty wild. Pretty wild when you look at that. So, man, what do I need to make now? I need to make more, right? So let's just say that I decide I'm going to pick a figure out of the air and say, well, maybe I need to make $14,000 a year more than I'm making right now. So $92,750, right? Cool. That's, that would help me pay off debt, give me a bit of, help me start to build up a cushion, extra stuff. In 2002, that would have been $53,000. That was exactly my pay minus child support and alimony back in 2002. So it would take me $14,000 a year now to get me back to the real income that I had back then that I was able to spend, because now I don't need to spend money on my children because they're, one's going to be 30 this year. The other ones are going to be 33 this year. I have grandchildren, for crying out loud. I don't need to spend that money anymore. But you get the idea. If I say, well, maybe I need like $20,000 more, let's be really extravagant. I want to make $20,000 more than I'm making right now. That's $98,750 if you've taken all the perks and stuff like that. Back in 2002, that would have been $56,000. $56,500. That has changed. Now here's the wild thing. They did a study back in 2010, which indicated that people don't get any more happier. The more money you get, the more life satisfaction people start to declare that they have. And at about $75,000, they said it tended to cap off. This has been debunked since then, and people are showing greater life satisfaction with heavier amounts of money now, adjusted for inflation and the whole 9 yards. However, let's just say, well, that was a good figure. Well, that was in 2010. In order to make the same amount of money now, you'd have to make $1.45 for every dollar. So, if I wanted to be happy as I could be, in 2010, making $75,000 a year, which I did not make in 2020, by the way, I would have to be making $108,750. That's $10,000 more than the outrageous salary increase that I'm thinking of $20,000 a year. That's amazing. That's amazing. And that's not even looking at, well, what if I just become self-employed? And then I need, that because now I need to buy my own health insurance, that sort of thing. But it's very clear that whatever I do, I need to make a significant amount more, and probably looking at something like 10, 15, $20,000 extra a year is not all that unrealistic in order to give myself a cushion at this age, pay off debt, and have a bit more of a lifestyle that I enjoy, which means like going out to eat a little bit more often, or maybe not fretting about buying something. And these years, I have not had an extravagant lifestyle. I will talk about like how I fell behind, but honestly, I bought a few RPGs. I've been to some concerts. Not a lot of RPGs actually. I bought some musical equipment, which is paying for itself. I'm in the red right now with that, but it is paying for itself. But I've had some unforeseen medical, and dental, especially dental expenses, all that kind of stuff. Unforeseen vet expenses. But a lot of it has just been cost of living and inflation, which after I look at all that makes me feel not as bad about myself. So when I say I need to make more money, it's not just this flippant statement. I've actually done an awful lot of research on this and realized, well, yeah, I do need to make some more. What about you? How much more do you need to make? Are you making enough? Do my figures sound crazy to you? What about your figures? Let's talk.